All right. So thank you, Nandeep, and welcome all to the session on Azure OpenAI. First of all, I would like to definitely thank the Pune Tech community for giving me this opportunity, and also for patiently replying back to my messages on LinkedIn. So for the past 2 months, I've been bugging them using the LinkedIn messages, right? So thank you so much for Pune Tech community for that. So a quick introduction about myself. I'm Anand and been into the IT industry for the past 15 years. As you can see on the screen, that's my LinkedIn profile. You can scan it and send me a connection request. And also I run a blog, my personal website, where I post articles, technical articles on Microsoft Azure primarily. And also I have a community. I run a small community in Meetup. So if you wish, you can also join that, right? So that's about me, a quick introduction about me. So moving on to the topic today, okay? So what we are going to talk in today's session is Azure OpenAI with AKS and Redis Cache. So what is AKS? For those of you who might have who are from the Azure background, right? As you might have worked in Azure Kubernetes Service. So just to understand, maybe are anyone in this session from the Azure background? Maybe you can give a thumbs up, because this topic you can relate it easily if you are from Azure. Not an issue if you have not worked in Azure, but just wanted to know. Okay, perfect. All right. So that's the session for today. Okay, and the agenda that we have for today is, so first of all, I'm going to cover what is Azure OpenAI, right? So we need to understand some important concepts in Azure OpenAI, right? Before going on to the practical session, we need to understand some important concepts. And also, what's the difference between ChatGPT and Azure OpenAI, right? Because there will always be a question when there are public platforms like ChatGPT, why do I really need to use Azure OpenAI? That's the question that many of us might have. So I'm going to answer that. And also different options to use the AI models, right? So as you know, there are several models out there in the market, right? For example, ChatGPT uses the GPT-4, GPT-5, and all that, and DeepSeek uses a different model. So how can we use these models? What are the different options to make use of these models? So that I'm going to explain, and I'm going to show you a demo. Where we use the Azure's OpenAI. We call it from the Azure Kubernetes Service, and we store the history of the chat in the Redis cache, right? So that's a demo I'm going to walk you through today. Uh, so this demo, right? Okay, so that's the demo. And also I have an application code. So the key takeaway for all of you in this session will be an application code that I will share at the end of this session, basically my GitHub repo that I will share. And making using this code, you can deploy this whole setup on your own, right? If you understand the whole concept, you can deploy this application on your own POC, right? So that you understand the end-to-end concept more in depth, right? So that will be the key takeaway for those of you in the session today. So that's the agenda. And also what we are not going to cover is basically there are some misconceptions, right? Whenever we talk about AI, people assume that we are going to build an agent and or build an LLM. So that's not the idea for today. So we are not going to develop an agent or not going to create a model. Of course, nobody can create except the key players. And also, I'm not going to spend time on building the application, right? The application code, because that's going to take some time. So I already have the application packaged. So that's not something I'm going to show today, but we will understand the concept, right? End-to-end concept with a demo. So with that said, let's jump on to the actual topic, right? So what is Azure OpenAI, right? So before even talking about this, I want to explain about using the different, I mean, use what are the different type methods that we can use these models, right? That's something we need to understand before we start anything at all, right? So as many of you might know, what is a model basically? So a model is nothing but the brain of the AI system, right? So models are, as you know, that GPT-4, GPT-5, several models are out there in the market. So the model is basically the brain of the AI platform. So if you use ChatGPT, it uses a model behind the scenes, right? Like GPT-4 and GPT-5 and others. So that's the brain of AI. So how do we use these models, right? There are different methods to use these models. So the majorly how the methods that are available for us is ChatGPT, the obvious thing. All of you might have used ChatGPT, which uses the models behind the scenes, right? So apart from ChatGPT, how can we use these models? So ChatGPT is a public platform, right? So many organizations do not allow ChatGPT to be used because of the security and governance and all that. So in that case, we have a couple of options. We need to go for a private setup, basically, right? Instead of using a public platform to have more security, we would opt for a private model, private kind of private setup, right? So in private setup, we have two categories. So one is you can host an open source model on top of your own infrastructure, right? Uh, Maybe on top of Azure VM or another server. You can install this model on top of an existing infrastructure. But the problem with this is you have to maintain the infrastructure, which is you need a massive infrastructure for this, right? So to host a large language model, you cannot host it on a simple basic Azure virtual machine. You need a massive resource to host this model in your own infrastructure, right? And it has to be an open source model. But this is where Azure comes into the picture and saves us, right? You don't where Azure helps us is it hosts the model on top of the Azure's infrastructure, right? So that you don't have to install the model, you don't have to own the resources to install the model. You just make use of the already managed model from the Azure, right? So that's what is Azure OpenAI. So Azure has got a model uh, which is installed on top of Azure's infrastructure, and we make use of that model in our application, right? So that's the concept of Azure OpenAI, right? It's a managed model. Maybe if you, I will call it as a model as a service. So that is what is Azure OpenAI. Now coming back to what Azure OpenAI, as I said, it's a model as a service that is given by Azure to us. We can consume it in a very quick way, like in an easy way, right? So an example of this Azure OpenAI, right? So for who are from the Azure background, right? You can very well relate to this with the PaaS SQL Server, right? So instead of installing the SQL software on a virtual machine and maintaining that, Azure gives the PaaS managed SQL Server, which is a PaaS SQL service where Azure installs the SQL software and we make use of that. Right, we don't have to manage the patches and the infrastructure behind the scenes. So that's a example that we can relate to, right? So it's similar to Azure PaaS SQL Server, right? Uh, as I said, if we don't use this Azure OpenAI and if we still need to have a private open model, right? We need to make use of the model. We can install an open source model on top of our own infrastructure, which, as I said, has got its own drawbacks, right? So that is what is Azure OpenAI, which is the core concept of today's session, right? We need to understand this very clearly. Okay, so why do we really need to use this, right? As I already said, mainly the privacy that Azure gives, right? So when you host something on top of Azure's infrastructure, when I say Azure, it's nothing but the Microsoft Azure portal, right? So you'll create this model in the portal, which is inside your Azure tenant, right? Which is inside your organization's boundary, right? You can have the all sort of security controls and you have the governance and all that, and also you can have this limited to your virtual network, right? It cannot be accessed publicly. You can have a private network and use this model within a particular virtual network within your own network, right? So that's the advantage that Azure OpenAI gives. Another important point that we need to be aware of is, so whenever you do a chat with the public platforms, especially with ChatGPT, your data is used to train the model by default, right? Even though they claim that there is an option to opt out of that, but still by default your data is used to train the model, right? And which, as you know, that data leak and all those things are there. But Azure, when you use Azure's OpenAI model from Azure, it guarantees that it does not use your data to train the model, right? So I have also shared the supporting links for that. So anyways, I'll share the PPT at the end of this session, so you can go through these links. So that's the one of the key advantage that I see with the Azure OpenAI, right? So that's, this is something we need to understand, right? Difference between using public platforms and Azure OpenAI, right? So categories I already covered using Azure. So our setup, now coming back to the how we are going to set up. I hope so far whatever I have explained made sense for all of us in the session. Maybe you can give a thumbs up just to make sure I'm on sync. Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right. All right. Thank you. Uh, so today's setup, how our setup is going to look like is, as I said, this is the Azure Open AI. Okay, this is the model, managed model that Azure gives us. So we will create this model from the Azure portal. Okay, and on the other side, I have this Azure Kubernetes service which I already created. I wanted to show the creation, but it takes some time, right? So I just created this already for the demo purpose. And this is the resource where I'm going to create the application. I'm going to host an application, custom application that is going to use this model. Okay, so I'll have some application code basically, which has got a front end and then got a business logic or back end, whatever you call it. So basically, how this works is I have a front end code that talks to the back end, and the back end reaches to the Azure OpenAI, right, to answer the queries posted from the front end. That's how the setup works. It is basically a simple setup, front end to the back end to the Azure managed OpenAI, right? User puts a question in the front end UI, that is taken to the backend. Backend sends that question back to Azure managed AI, and the AI model answers the question. That's a simple setup that we have. So now we have a Redis cache here. So why do we even have this here? Right? We need to understand this very clearly. So I have a Redis cache here, and basically why I have this Redis cache here is to save the chat history, right? To understand this more clearly, let me show you my chat GPT example, right? The typical chat GPT window that you're seeing on your screen. Now, on the left hand side, as you can see, that's the chat history. Okay, whatever you are seeing, the chats that so far what I have done, right? A couple of chats that I have done. So this needs to be stored somewhere, right? So ideally, there will be some database where this chat history will be saved, right? So that is one of the reason we have a Redis cache here to store the chat history. Okay, and also another reason to have a database is we need to understand this, right? So I want to take an example to explain this, right? Why we have this Redis cache. So just see this example. I have asked a question. My first question on this chat window, current chat window is how old is Donald Trump, right? It gave me an answer. In the same chat window, I'm asking, are you sure, right? And it gave the answer as expected. Yes, the calculation is correct. Gave the answer as expected. Now, the second, whenever I ask this second question, the model, all these questions, by the way, goes to the model, right? The answer comes from the model. Uh, so when the second question is asked, it needs to know the context of the first question, right? Because I'm not giving a clue about Donald Trump in the second question. So it needs to know the context. So what is the first question? Based on that only, it needs to answer this, right? So behind the scenes, what will happen is your model cannot read the database. As I said, the chat is saved in the database every time when something is sent, queried. But your model cannot read the database directly, right? That is not practically possible. That's not how the model works. Your model cannot make calls to the backend or something, right? That will be a huge database call, which does not happen. So every time what happens is your whenever you send the second query, your context or the previous chat is also shared in the API call, right? Uh, so whenever you ask, are you sure? It also your post API call also sends the previous chat history so that the model knows the context of the previous question. Now the question might be, does it send everything to the model? So when I ask one question, does it send every chat history back in the back to the model? No, it does not do that. Uh, Let me share you another example, right? So here, see the question. I asked something about network topology 15 days back. Can you answer it? Right? Even though the chat history, I can go ahead and see the chat, which is saved in some database. It will not be able to answer that without knowing the context, right? So the thing is, the model cannot read the database. At the same time, it does not send the history in the query every time, right? It only sends the history in the current chat. So whatever is there in this current chat, it will in every next query of the current chat, it will send the entire history of the current chat, right? And it does not send the entire thing, right? But ChatGPT also remembers, interestingly, it also remembers your important things, like maybe some of the important things it summarizes, right? And that it saves in the memory and sends back in every query, right? Only important uh, things that you might have shared with ChatGPT, right? So that's how it might know a few things which you might have shared in the past, but not everything that you share. Right, so that's how at a high level AI model works. Your chat GPT basically works, right? So there are several other things involved in the background, but at a high level, this is how the context for the AI model works. Um, Another example that I had is okay. So I hope it makes sense so far. It might be a bit confusing for few of us. Okay, perfect. So that's how a basic AI model works, and this I'm going to show you in a real-time application, right? So far we have seen mostly the theory part. Now let's see how a real-time application works. Okay, so that's the setup I have. Okay, right? AKS, our application code is going to be running on top of this AKS. AKS makes a call to the Azure managed AI. Every chat history gets saved in the managed Redis cache, and every time a new query is sent to Azure Managed AI, the model, the new query is appended with the previous queries in the same chat window. Right? That's how the application is created. And just to let you know, I'm not a developer. Okay, so this application, I know the concept, but I'm not basically from the development background. Um, Okay, so that's the setup that we have today, and whenever so we'll basically expose this application to the public internet using a load balancer, Azure load balancer. So basically, we'll have a public URL. When we access that public URL, it will land to the application UI, and then we put our queries in the application UI, which hits the backend and then to the model. Right? That's how it works. So let's see how this all works. Okay. So before that, let me see if I missed something in the slide. Okay. All right. Now, Jumping on to our Azure portal. So I have a Kubernetes cluster that's already created. Hope you are able to see the portal. Yeah. Okay. So this is the cluster that I created, and okay, it got disconnected. For the demo purpose, I'm going to delete the application pods that I already created. Okay. So let me just delete every application that I have. And one more thing to be aware is you don't have to install this application on AKS, right? This application code or whatever custom application that you have, you can host it on any Azure service. It can be app service or even an Azure virtual machine. From there, you can call the OpenAI model, right? So in this diagram, this AKS can be replaced by any Azure resource, not necessary to have an Azure Kubernetes service, right? So once I share this code, you can have your own Azure resource, deploy it on top of Azure app service or whatever you have, and run this application. That's something we need to be aware of. Any of you from the AKS background just wanted to know? Might have worked in Azure Kubernetes Service? Okay, no worries. Think of it like just an Azure resource, right? Because I don't want to complicate anything. Want to make sure that all of them are getting the concept. Okay, so right now I don't have any pods, right? Pod is where it's like a resource where I host my application. Think of it like a mini virtual machine. Now I'm going to, and also what other resource I have is I already created this Redis cache. Okay, I have an Azure managed Redis, and creating this Azure managed Redis is very simple. Okay, so I just use the default to create this. So what I did is just fill up the basics like name and choose some tier. I used the basic tier and I allowed it to be publicly accessible for the demo purpose. Active geo replication, just default advanced, just disabled high availability, non-clustered. So it's a basic setup, right? So nothing much to worry about the Redis cache. You don't have to go deep into the Redis cache. I just have a basic Redis cache with me. And advantage of using Redis caches is it is quite fast when compared to other databases, right? For you, quick retrieval of the data, Redis cache are used in several applications, right? But in real time, it'll be a complex setup, right? Some huge database and all that. But for our demo, I'm using Redis cache. So that's how I created the Redis cache. And apart from the Redis cache, what I have is AKS that I showed. OpenAI, since the core session is about OpenAI, I'm going to create that, right? Which is going to be useful for everyone. So how do we create OpenAI? There are two options. Okay, there is a resource called as OpenAI standalone resource, but Microsoft is promoting the Foundry, right, which is a kind of hub to deploy all the Azure AI related products, right? We maybe call it as a hub, basically like an grouping all the AI applications, right? We can make use of the Foundry. So I'm going to use Foundry, okay, to create our OpenAI model. So now as I create this model, you'll understand more about the things that I explained earlier. Just giving some random name. We need to create a project. So by default, it creates some project. I'm not going to use any storage, just a very basic resource. And the network, I'm just allowing it for the internet access. So basically, you will restrict this to only the application, right? Because as per the diagram, only this needs to communicate with the Azure OpenAI, right? Your AKS or another Azure resource needs to communicate with OpenAI. Uh, but for this demo purpose, I'm just going to use allow all the networks here to make it simple. Identity by default, all others are default. Let me just create this. And for those of you who want to start with the Azure OpenAI, right? So this is something that's very important. So how do you create an Azure OpenAI model, right? That's what we need to understand. So it takes a couple of minutes to create this. Meanwhile, let me see if I had missed any important concept. Yeah, as I said, AKS makes a query. Basically, it's like a query to the OpenAI model, like how you'll do a query to the database, right? Similar to that. So that's the idea behind it. All right. Okay, so it created a Foundry resource for us. Now, the next thing that we need to do is we go to the project that we created by default. So once we are inside the project, so all these OpenAI related resources are going to be inside your Foundry portal, right? So if you want to create any models, not create a model, make use of the model, right? You need to go to the Foundry portal, right? Because this term we need to be very clear. We never create a model. Models are created by the large organizations. So here we are within the Foundry portal. It integrates with the Azure portal. So whatever login you use for your Azure portal, that's the same login you'll use for your Foundry portal. Now I go to the playgrounds. My application is basically a chat application, right? I'm not going to use other models, images, several options are here. Okay, so I'm going to use a chat application and going to create a deployment. Let me show how it works. So the first thing is for us to use the model, we need to create a deployment, right? It's the basic stuff that we need to do to make use of the model. So I'm going to create a new deployment from base models. Just see what happens. It will show it'll list all the models available to us. I'm going to use a small model, GPT-5 Nano. So I just choose that and confirm. As you have seen, there are 5 Nano. Okay, just a moment. See if I can use this model. Okay. Some of the settings can be customized here, right? So maybe one thing we need to understand here is the capacity, right? So what this means here is whenever we do a chat with the AI platform, right? So we call it a query or prompt, but in technical terms, basically it is called as a token. right? So whenever you ask, right, some question, it is counted as a token, and based on that only Azure does the pricing. Okay, so what this means here is, for 1 minute using this model, you can send 100,000 tokens. That's 1 lakh tokens, right? So tokens is basically the number of words that you send, number of words or the letters that you send, right? There is some calculation behind the scenes. So that's what is tokens. That's the maximum limit that this model has got, right? So 100K tokens per minute. So this you have to relate with the prompt that we share every time to the model, right? So if the history is added every time back to the model, if the query adds the whole history, then this limit might be crossed easily, right? If you take all the history and send to the model every time, this limit is going to get crossed. That's why we want to limit this token. That's why Azure gives an option. I'm going to deploy this one now. So you have done the deployment. See how simple it is for us to make use of an OpenAI model. We just deployed it from the GUI, and this is like a developer portal, right? You won't allow, let's say, you won't allow your customers or everyone to use this portal and do a chat here, right? You need to have an application, a dedicated application, or else you might integrate this piece in your application also, right? You might have an application for a different purpose. You might integrate this in that application also. So here you can, it's like a developer portal, right? You can test something here. 10 tokens. When I say 10 tokens, it will answer using only 10 tokens, right? Just to save the cost, I'm asking it to use a short token. Okay. Returned the answer as expected. So now our model is ready. We have done the deployment. So now how do we call this in our application, right? Let's go into the application. So here already what I have done is I have built my application. Okay, this is the front end that makes a call to the backend. And in this backend, I have given the AI endpoint as an environment variable. Okay, so basically this backend will call the OpenAI model using an environment variable, right? So where is that environment variable is Azure OpenAI endpoint. And how do we get this URL is basically from here, if you go this sample code, this is the URL that the application should call. Okay, until this Foundry 4444. That's the environment variable that I will pass in my pod configuration. In your case, when you use another different application, you need to pass this as an environment variable, right? And I deployed a mini. My model name is GPT-5 mini. Okay, and Redis. Okay, so the application, coming back to the application, I pass my OpenAI endpoint. And also this uses the managed identity of the calling application by default. So this is the default code, right? The SDK provided by Azure, right? So it, behind the scenes, uh, to connect to this OpenAI endpoint, right? My application needs to authenticate to this OpenAI endpoint. So we created a deployment and Azure OpenAI resource. Not everyone can access this resource, right? Not every application in the Azure can access this resource. It needs to have the right authentication, right? It needs to get authenticated to the Azure OpenAI resource. So that's what is happening using this default Azure credentials, where we will have a managed identity attached to the Azure Kubernetes Service. If you use an app service, you will have a managed identity attached to the app service. Concept is similar for every other Azure resource. So that managed identity, we give an access on this OpenAI resource. So let me just quickly show that to you. So now this Foundry access is not given to any Azure resource. Okay, so let me give the access. So I give the cognitive services user role. And as I said, I'm giving it to the managed identity of my AKS that's attached to my AKS. So this is the managed identity that's attached to my AKS cluster. Okay, so the access part is done now. Okay, coming back to the code. So default Azure credential using the managed identity, it connects to the Azure OpenAI endpoint. And also we are authenticating to the Redis cache. So as I said, my application is written to send the chat history during every prompt, right? So just to understand the basic application code, what it does is it loads the chat history from Redis, it saves the chat history, and every time API is posted, a query is posted, it along with the new message, it also appends the chat history, okay, of the current chat, not every chat, just the current chat, right? And once the response is received from the model, it saves that history again back to the Redis cache, right? So that's how the simple code works. Okay, so nothing much complicated in this code. And similarly, we need to authenticate to the Redis cache, right? The way we authenticated to OpenAI. Similarly, Redis cache also is not open to everyone. The network part is opened, but still you need the authentication, right? So for that, again, the AKS application is going to reach the Redis cache, right? Similarly, I need to give access to the Redis cache for my managed identity. So I've already done that, right? So how do you do that is go to the authentication and I just added my managed identity, right? I select the member from here and I choose the managed identity and add it here, right? So that's all done. So now the authentication part is complete. Okay, and I pass my environment variable. Um, that's the OpenAI endpoint, the deployment name. For Redis cache, we do get a endpoint from the portal. So this is the endpoint, right? And the port also, we do get it from the portal. That's 10,000, the port used. That also, we have variabilized it in the application, right? So this application, I have already bundled this image and sent I mean, this image is already packaged. The application code is available in the as an image for us, and I'm just using that image and passing the environment variables, right? So on top of this image in runtime, this environment variables will be deployed so that it reaches out to the right endpoint, right? At a high level, that's what we need to understand. Uh, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and deploy this application now. Okay. So I'm going to import this manifest files. Import backend also. Okay. Okay, so a couple of things got created for us. Okay, pods. Okay, I have my backend application. Think of it like one server running the backend code, another server running the front end. Okay, and also I'm exposing this front end using a public service, which might have created a public IP for me. Right, so this is the public IP. I'm going to access this now. Let's see what happens. So this is my application, right? It's all about the code that I have built, right? So it's up and running as expected. Now, uh, let's send a query. Okay. Yes. Okay. I hope the demo works. Okay. Perfect. Mm, it worked as expected, right? It reaches out to the model, and the model returns an answer, throws back to us in the UI, right? So now let's understand how the context works. Are you sure? Yeah, it understands the context also because my application is written to send the previous queries in the current chat, right? Now, if I go and ask in a different chat, are you sure? It won't know that, right? It won't understand the context because your query has got only this chat. I hope it makes sense now with this answer. So it doesn't know what am I even talking about, right? Because your AI model cannot read the database, and also uh, my application does not send the whole history, which is practically not good to send the whole history, right? So that's how the context works with the models, right? Now I want to show another example here, but before this, should we take questions, Nandeep? I hope all of them are on sync, or can we take
Um,
the questions at the end?
yeah, maybe we can take it at the end. Please
Okay,
continue with the demo. Sure.
okay, sure. So now I want to show something. Okay, what happens if I delete a Redis cache history? Okay, which I will show you to you now, which might be quite interesting. Okay, I'm going to connect to the Redis cache from the backend application. Okay, so I'm inside the backend application now, and I'm going to connect to the Redis cache using some commands. Okay, so basically I'm reaching out to the Redis using the default Azure credential, which will use the managed identity to talk to the Redis cache. Okay, let me just paste that. Hope it's going to challenge with this. Okay, perfect. Um, Turkeys. Okay. Now, what you see here is nothing but the three chats that I have in my app from my application, right? So I have, and also I did a chat from the model, right? So you see three different history that is saved in the Redis cache. Okay. Now I'm going to clear out this history. Okay. For the demo purpose, let me just clear out this history by using this command. I hope we don't mind if it takes another extra 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah, no problem. Please take your time.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So let me delete all of this, right? Now, if I check the keys history, nothing is there. Okay. So I don't have anything now. Let's do something. I'm going to open this in a in private window. Okay, so we have a fresh chat now. Everything is deleted, and I'm going to show you something. Who is? Let me ask something here. Michael Phelps. Yes, 10 tokens. Okay. Okay. Now let me see here. Something should have got saved here. Hmm, okay, I see two different items here. Okay, I'm going to open another one. Okay, perfect. We have two queries now, right? And 04 is latest 6. And I'm going to delete the latest one. Okay, let's see. It will make sense when I show this after this deletion, right? It will make sense what I'm trying to do actually. 3. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the history for the second query I saved. Okay, that's what I'm trying to do. Okay, so now only my first query is there. Now let me do something. Okay, in the first query, I'm going to ask it. Sure. Yeah, it returned as expected. Now I'm going to send the same thing here. Let us see what happens. I hope it makes sense, right? So it does not know the context because I just deleted the history stored in the Redis cache, right? So it won't send the, it was not able to find the first question I sent. So basically it lost the context. But in the previous question, the chat history is still there in the Redis cache. So it was able to answer the question next to that because it knows the context. The model was told about the context in the query, right? But in this uh, query that I sent, it does not know about the context because I deleted this whole history that was saved in the Redis cache, right? So this is how your context for the model works, right? But in real time, this is a very simple context fetching from the Redis cache. But in real time, right, it is way complex, right? We cannot even understand how the whole ChatGPT architecture works. But at a high level, it sends the summary and some of the important context even from the previous chat, not everything, right? But definitely we can say that the model does not read the context directly. It is fetched from some database and your application handles that logic. You can control your application. Now, my application uses only the context from the current chat history, but you can develop your own application and control the way your context works, right? You can send the whole history or you can send particular history about some important items, whatever the way you want your application to send the context and retrieve the context. You can design your application according to your needs, right? So that's the important thing that we need to understand. So, with that said, I think too much of talking. I definitely want to leave it to Nandeep for questions. I hope all of them are on sync. Yeah.